Hi, welcome to the BariNation podcast, where we support the bariatric community with humor, humility, and honesty. I'm April.
I'm Jason.
I'm Natalie.
Today, we're welcoming back our friend, BariNation expert, and fellow bariatric patient, Timisha Malone. Hi, friend.
Hi, guys.
We are so excited to talk to you today. This is a bit of a heavier topic, so to speak. We are going to be talking about grief, and specifically bariatric grief. But one of the reasons that we're so honored that we could speak with you today is you have years, decades of experience working in the grief realm of mental health care and support. And not only do you have that experience from that professional lens, but you yourself are a patient. You've experienced bariatric grief, and you're kind of going through some things now. And it is a monumental opportunity to really go deep into what bariatric grief is, what it looks like, what it feels like, and give us some tools for how we can move through it. You are an expert in this field, and we are so excited to be able to tap into that.
And thank you. This is definitely one of those topics that everybody goes through at some point in their life, but it's not talked about enough. And there's not much education around it. It's more so, I'm feeling this certain way, but I don't know how to place it. So let's talk about it.
Yep. And we are so thankful for this. And this conversation really could not be more timely. A lot of things in the world just feels heavy right now. And I know as a bariatric patient, I think all of us have gone through this. After surgery, we couldn't put a name to what we were feeling until somebody told us, oh, it's probably grief. And that word unlocked this entire new realm of possibility and this doorway into our feelings. And once we were really able to understand what grief is and how it was appearing in our lives in terms of our bariatric selves, amazing things happened. And I just want to invite all of you, if you're listening or you're watching this podcast and you think that maybe you are experiencing some grief before or after bariatric surgery, or you are moving through grief right now, we invite you to join the BariNation support community, because Timisha is leading bariatric grief support groups now in BariNation. It is a place for you to go and understand this grief, understand these feelings, to give you a safe place to learn how to work through them, and then to really kind of practice moving through grief as life continues to happen. I'm 4 years post-op. I continue to experience bariatric grief every year, every step of the way. I know Jason and Timisha, I know you guys are the same too. You continue to experience grief along your journey. So to have this safe place for you to learn about it and practice grief is amazing. And we are so thankful that this support now exists. So if you would like to learn and grow with Timisha, please join the BariNation support community today. You can do so by visiting www.barination.mn.co. We would love to see you in the nation. Okay, so before we dive into the topic, I'd love to give you the floor, my friend. Timisha, will you introduce yourself to any of our listeners or watchers who have never met you before?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Timisha. I am a licensed bariatric therapist, but most importantly, I am a bariatric patient myself. I had Roux-en-Y surgery in 2021, and we are a bariatric household. So my husband also had Roux-en-Y surgery. Ask us about our food bill. It's fantastic. Running joke. But we are experiencing a lot of these different emotions that we never thought we would. And I am thankful to have a partner to be able to experience this and be able to identify where our off days are and, kind of where in the cycle we are. Why I personally use grief and that phrase in my own is because I have been a hospice therapist for many, many months. I've worked with families, and I've noticed that we grieve who we used to be as bariatric patients and the way that we used to have this life that was comfortable. And I used comfortable, and I'd like to get into that a little bit further, a little bit later. But ultimately, I want us to start having a deep dive of what is self-grief. And It's basically to me is it's the parts of us that have been deprived of care and safety. It's the parts of us that have been pushed down and silenced for so long that once we start going through this process, it starts coming back up. We start feeling the feels. And as we know, there's 5 stages of grief that is well known. We have the denial, the anger, the bargaining, the depression, and acceptance. And there's another theory from Dr. Kubler-Ross that says that there are 7 stages of grief. And if it's okay with all of you, I'd like to give you some examples on these 7 stages in my personal journey. And maybe it will help others to kind of recognize. The first stage from Dr. Ross says shock and denial. Personally, I see this as my oh shit moment. That moment when we realize that life is bigger than just us. The moment when we realize that these limitations are causing some ripples in our life. This is the moment where we start thinking about maybe there's a different approach to our weight with how we are now. So shock and denial. Then we have the pain and guilt. How did I let myself get to where I am? I wish I shoulda, coulda, woulda, those cognitive distortions start filing in. Why didn't I do this sooner? And we get that anger, that bargaining, that I can do this by myself. I don't understand why I can't just do it. Right? Before we realize that obesity is a disease. Then we get our depression. Right? I'm doing all the things and yet my weight still isn't moving. What am I doing wrong? Why is it me? I say that this is our screw it at, what's the point, right? That all or nothing, what's the point? And then that reconstruction and working through. Right? This is where we tend to catch that I need help. I did the things, that upward turn, that I got surgery, I'm doing my GLP-1s, I'm going through my metabolic wellness, I'm starting to feel good. And then what's next? And how do we work through that? And so for myself, that's that cog in the wheel that I was stuck with, right? I knew who I was back then. I knew the places I shopped. I knew that when I walked into a room, I would scope out to see if I'm physically bigger. I would walk up a flight of stairs and pretend not to be out of breath. That's just who my identity was. So what happens now that I'm in a normal size and Torrid no longer carries my size? What happens when I walk up a flight of stairs and I'm the first one on the top? Right? What do I do? And it's those little things that I'm proud of where I am, and a part of me misses who I used to be. It was comfort.
I'm so thankful that you said that. And the other thing that keeps going through my mind too, Timisha, as you were going through kind of those different examples, is it really brought back all of the moments along this journey that I experienced grief. I went through kind of the big 5, the week after my surgery. But I continue to go through all of them, plus the kind of that reconstruction and working through, because what you just said, I don't know who I am necessarily at this size and shape. And I'm continually reminded throughout my journey or every day that I don't know who I am. I just recently had this experience. I've been a size 16. Well, I've been a size 14 for a very long time, but probably the last 2 years of my bariatric journey. All of a sudden, I'm a size 12. So once again, I don't know who I am. I don't recognize myself. I don't recognize the shape of my body. And I am, I think, grieving that loss of familiarity. Once again, I don't know who I am. I don't know my size and my shape. And I'm 4 years post-op. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Why do I continue to go through this? I just don't, I just don't understand.
One of the things I started to ask you about that when you talked about going from a 14 to a 12 and kind of being kind of in a different mindset about it. Remember when we were talking about kind of getting to know our bodies and actually touching ourselves and doing post-shower routines, and kind of, have you felt like you've gone away from doing that? So you kind of have to relearn the new kind of landscape that you're dealing with?
So here's the super weird thing that I cannot wrap my brain around. I have not changed my shower routine. So when Jason says that, so every morning after my shower, I put on body oil, and it's really helped me understand what my new size and shape is. I feel that my size and shape has grown, but the scale and my clothing is telling me it has actually shrunk. So I am grieving the connection that I used to know I actually had with my size and my shape, because that is gone. It is absolutely gone. And people who I haven't seen in a couple of weeks even have come up to me and they're like, "Oh my God, you've lost so much weight again." And I'm like, "Are you you cannot be talking to me. Like, you have lost your damn minds." That is absolutely not the case. I just feel so detached from the reality that I thought I knew. And I kind of feel like I'm in the shock, denial, and almost anger, because I'm mad at people when they tell me that. I'm just like, no, like, what is wrong with you? Something is wrong with you, because I'm almost panicking, because now I don't even know who I am anymore again.
Well, it's got to be a strange kind of disassociation almost, because that's legit. Like you know how you feel, and you know how you feel to yourself. But when other people come up and say that, you're kind of like, looking around like, that's not, yeah. So the disassociation of that's got to be strange.
It's been a real challenge. It's been a real challenge. And in a lot of ways, it has, I guess what it has reconnected me with is the grief and loss that I felt at the very beginning of this journey, and continuing to try to reconnect with who I am, right? Like, Tamisha, in the beginning, you were talking about like this loss of identity. How I knew I was grieving is I felt an instantaneous loss of connection with what I thought I knew or who I thought I was. That was how I knew that, like, oh, okay, this is grief. And I'm feeling that exact same loss of connection right now. And it is throwing me for a loop, total loop.
I think what's really getting me, as you were speaking to Misha about the stages, I wasn't thinking so much post-op. I was actually thinking about all of the time pre-op that I was actually grieving, and I didn't even know that I was grieving. I've been through that all or nothing stage. I talk about it. It's a huge part of my journey. I had a screw it moment, and I said, I'm just going to love myself at 400 pounds. Doesn't matter what I eat, what I wear, how I look. If I have to pretend that I'm not dying at the top of the stairs, then fine. Like, I just had that moment. And then very shortly after, in conjunction with losing a loved one, I realized, oh shit, I need help. And so, but it's really interesting to me because I thought my grief started post surgery or post decision to have surgery, but it really started 2 years before my surgery. And that, I'm like sitting with that and a little mind blown.
It helps us get to our pre-contemplation phase, right? It helps.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. Will you explain that? How does grief help us get to pre-contemplation? I'm going to need you to slow walk me to that one, please.
Absolutely. So, that shock and denial, right? First is kind of admitting that like life is bigger than just us, our oh shit moment, right? It starts getting us into thinking about, okay, well, this is something that's achievable. Well, we can do it. And then we get into our contemplation. And then let's do it. Let's sign up. It starts.
Yeah, see, that's that to me. That my shocking moment was, I guess would be between when the cardiologist told me that I should have bariatric surgery and my primary care doctor telling me that I qualify for it. That was by putting the two pieces together. And that honestly is, yeah. So I was in the kind of like with Natalie stage for the 5 years I didn't have the surgery and should have, was me telling myself, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to love myself how I am. I'm good. Like, nothing bad's going to happen. I'm not that big. That's when you do the whole, like, watching my 600-pound life and go, well, at least I'm not that big, or it could be so much worse. And I went through all of those stages before I finally, before it came down to me realizing that I had to. But that makes a lot of sense.
Well, yeah, and I think I kind of had my oh shit moment before my all or nothing, screw it, it's fine moment, I tried to have surgery 2 years prior to when I actually decided, and I got denied twice by insurance. I knew that I needed help. I'm doing all the right things. I'm, going through the motions that I should be. Nothing's working out for me. So, well, I'm just going to live my life no matter what. But then it did get me to that pre-contemplation stage of like, okay, maybe I need to do something, and finally pulling the trigger because I knew that I needed help. But that pre all or nothing grief stage was 2 years of me working through that before, and then another year before I pulled the trigger to have surgery. But I was grieving for those 3 years and I had no idea.
What if I were to tell you that these cycles is not just an all or one, right? It doesn't just go in a cycle. You can experiencing them in all different stages, right? Some days you could have denial. Some days you could have depression, the whole nine.
That was going to be you read my mind, right? We had a powerful conversation with Laura Grabo, and she described, right, grief as just kind of these waves, right? That come in and out. But it's very interesting to learn that grief doesn't necessarily happen in this cycle, right? These are the stages of grief, and you can have a wave of anger and then another wave of shock and then a wave of denial, right? So it's yeah. I mean, you guys know my brain works visually, so I've always thought of it as like a cycle, right? I'm just going to move through the cycle, and then boom, I can check it off. I'm not in grief anymore. And you guys know how much that stresses me out. I need to be able to check this thing off. But you're telling me that's not the case, and this is an ocean of life, and it will continue to. Oh my God!
Everyone wanted to step off the hamster wheel. She just wanted to go one time around and then step off and go, "I'm done. I'm all good."
Wow.
So why people get so stuck is, how do I process this, right? Like, I thought I got over that. I thought I was fine. And I just want to take a moment to honor the fact that just because we are grieving and we are saddened by what we are feeling right now does not mean we are not thankful for this journey. I know that there's a lot of mindset about how can two emotions live in your mind at the same time? Well, because they're powerful and it's your damn mind.
Yeah. No, I mean, we talk about how hard the journey is a lot, but I still don't know anybody who's not thankful for being on it. Like, this is one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, but I wouldn't trade it for anything, honestly.
Sorry, I'm like feverishly writing things down. If you're watching, you're seeing me do this because like my pencil's on fire. Dialectic, is that the word for when we hold two conflicting emotions at the same time?
Got it. DBT expert over there.
Oh my God. Wow. Well, I'm signing up for a master's degree course after this.
You are not. We're cutting you off.
Yes, you're done.
Basically, just like take the exam at this point and be like, yep, MSW, check. Like,
I mean, as long as I can check something off, I mean, dear Lord, I'm going to lose my mind if I can't start checking some things off. Okay. Because we've been talking about this a lot in BariNation, and I up until recently, I did not know that you could live two conflicting emotions at the same time. I thought that my human vessel was only capable of one emotion at a time, and that when we had these conflicting emotions, it meant something was wrong. What I'm starting to understand from my lived experience is, no, it doesn't mean anything is wrong. What I'm interpreting it as is that I'm growing in maturity when it comes to understanding who I am as a person, and just my ability to process my human experience. When I was, before surgery and even after surgery, right, one emotion at a time, that was a big leap for me because I don't like to think or be in my emotions. That's just not what I did. So my first step was, oh, what's an emotion and what are they? And oh, I'm experiencing one. And then what do I do? Now I'm realizing I can be happy and sad. I can be fearful and joyful. I can be all of these things at the same time. It doesn't discount both of those feelings. And the fact that there's space for two emotions, to me, tells me it's going to be okay. There is a path out of this. It doesn't mean that I need to go faster or slower, but that other emotion is there telling me, no, this is okay. This is okay. You can still tap into joy, right? That joy that you experience in your life is still there, while still, right, shock, denial, bargaining, depression, all of these other things. And that's a really difficult place to get to. And it's scary because you just don't think that that's right. Does that make sense?
The purpose of mourning oneself is not to dwell, it's to make room for the change that you're about to feel. You know, kind of like the metaphor of the caterpillar, you know, and moving into the beautiful butterfly. Of course, it misses being on the ground and the friends on the ground, but it doesn't mean that they're not excited about spreading their wings.
Look at that.
I need
so mad right now.
I need you to repeat that line though, because you said it a little soft, and I need you to say it with a little gusto.
Okay. This is something that I personally use. So I have it on my computer. So if you see me looking down, I literally like have it. The purpose of mourning oneself is not to dwell, but to make room for the change you want to see by leaving the past version of yourself behind.
Which is bariatrics in a nutshell, right? I mean,
absolutely.
We love and acknowledge our pre-op selves. I think April, Jason, and I know Timisha, you say this all the time as well. We don't discount the person before our surgery. They're the people who they did all the heavy lifting, right? Getting us to where we are now. However, we can mourn that person to make room for the person that we're becoming and growing into. And I think that's so beautiful.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things Timisha said that's so powerful about that is we had comfort in who we were before. Like, we knew how to do that. Like, we knew everything. We knew the ins and outs of that because we've been doing it for so long. This new what's on the horizon, we have no idea. And that's the biggest fear for change, is the unknown, because you don't know what you're stepping into. Like Timisha said, you don't know what your style is going to be. You don't know what you're going to look like. You don't know how you're going to be, accepted or receptive, depending on what room you walk into. Things change for a lot of people in a lot of different ways. And it's a scary situation. So, that also factors into a lot of the mourning, I think, for that as well.
And I just want to talk about that fear. I personally am, so those who know, I have a 3.5-year-old, and sometimes I'm like, I am just like you with the fear, because society told me that I wasn't able to ride the roller coaster. Society told me that I was physically too large for these events. And now that I'm able to do it, I'm terrified. But I'm also excited. Like, I wish I had mom and dad to hold my hands to coach me through these little things, but now it's up to me and trusting myself.
Dude, my brain is just absolutely, it is like, I've got the Tokyo Gymnastic Olympics going on in my brain right now, because oh my God, now I'm finally starting to realize like why it just feels better when we do these NSV things together with other bariatric patients or just with somebody else. It's like, I just need somebody to say like, nope, this is okay. Like, I'm going to go do this thing. This is okay. I'm doing this. Right. And people are like, yeah, like, well, I don't understand what the big deal is. Like, yeah, you're going to walk a 5K, or yeah, you're going to go on a roller coaster, but they're not seeing or hearing, experiencing what's going on up here. And I guess the big through line for me at the moment, which I guess I knew, but I didn't really realize, grief is the pathway to the future. That is the path that you walk to get there to the future, because you are absolutely mourning the person that you were and the past. And that was very comfortable. That was known, that was recognized, that was safe, even though it was painful. That was there. And grief is absolutely kind of breaking up with the past. Like, you're acknowledging the past. You're actually putting a marker in the ground, so to speak, and saying, nope, that is no more.
also, to be able to do that, you have to be an ally to your past self. You have to realize that there is trust there and that you weren't broken before. You were surviving. And that accepting who you used to be, because our hurt parts need love and compassion too, in order to not, at least in my journey, I was teeter-tottering, right? I was trying to hold on to who she used to be, while also pretending to be who I want to be in order to become her. But I was never fully invested in who I wanted to be because I miss her. I miss going out to dinner. I miss binging on the couch with popcorn and a movie and the love and, buying a birthday cake and being able to eat a large amount of it just because I'm the sugar person. And it's hard to let go of those small events because they mattered. But how can you live with both? And there's that grief cycle, right? How do we accept?
Oh my God. So at the same time, we can grieve the loss of connection as grief is helping us sever the connection.
That's kind of the dealio of grief. And, in asking yourself just gently, what are these emotions I'm feeling? And accepting that there's no such thing as a bad bariatric patient. Some incredible humans said that. It's you guys.
I mean, we might have said it, but it belongs to the community. It belongs there.
That our pain is a defense mechanism, right? Like it constantly, it's trying to protect us. It's in survival mode. And when these emotions start bubbling up, our first defense is to go back to comfort.
Mm-hmm.
As you, Timisha, and April were both talking through that, it made me think about the 5K foam fest that April and I did with some friends back in June. I have vision impairment. I'm technically slightly disabled on my driver's license. And they had obstacles and all of these crazy things on this 5K. It was a farm, and so it was not a paved road. It was like the whole day was just such a challenge, right, for me, and for everyone, but focusing on myself. But there was an obstacle and I was like, okay, I'm gonna do at least one, right? Like I should do one. And I remember in that moment really grieving my past self, because with the help of my bariatric friends, they helped me, overcome that obstacle very physically, but at the same time, mentally, I was grieving because the old me, the comfortable part of me, wanted to say, nope, it's too hard, too much. I'm overwhelmed. I'm done, and, yeah, just to experience it with people who get it. And I know we talk about this all the time too. To grieve actively with other people is also really liberating and really a new way of forming those relationships. But I was grieving in that moment, which was not comfortable. And it kind of sucked. I mean, it was great, but it kind of sucked.
Absolutely. I want to honor what you said because there is beauty in grief. And that sometimes gets missed. Even physical grief, when we lose a loved one, there's a moment where the family sometimes comes together in those moments, and we talk about the loved one and how they impacted us. And there is a beauty and a sense of community there. And as Laura says, community is treatment. And that really helps us get through. So I wanted to thank you for bringing up that there is a light and that there is positivity even in the deepest of trenches.
I mean, the theme for this month. So if you're listening to this podcast in October of 2023, our kind of fall support theme is growing through what we go through, right? And it is this idea that we are going to go through some very difficult things, but the reason we go through these things is so that we can grow into a different person. And it's not to say that our old self was bad, but evolution and change is a part of the human experience. And if we really do want to be a different person, and live a different way, and live a different weight, and live at a different size and shape, we have to become a different person. And knowing that we are going to use grief almost as a tool to help us honor the past, honor who we were, acknowledge that experience that we lived was truthful, and then move on from that person, that past, that truth, into this different reality, right? Grief is the conduit that allows us to do that. So in that way, grief really is beautiful. It's amazing. It's exciting and inspiring. I mean, the reason that BariNation exists is because we all went through grief. We all went through that, and we created something out of the grief that we were experiencing.
Well, and we've all cycled through different, we've all cycled through the different stages of it as well. Each of us have talked about that on a routine basis in different episodes, and just with each other when we're not recording. So, I mean, it all comes back to the same thing. We're all fighting to get to the other side of, the hard stuff. But honestly, getting through the hard stuff we've already been through is what's helping us to get through the hard stuff we're dealing with now. So the cycles eventually become, they don't ever go away. They just become a little easier to deal with because we use the tools that we've gained by going through the stuff we've already been through.
Mm-hmm. Timisha, are there things that we can do to help us move through these waves of grief? Are there specific things that you think just really make a bigger impact on grief?
Yes, I think the first step is understanding what we need as human beings, just in general. And I because I'm a social worker, I want to go back to the Milo's hierarchy of care, right? Like, it's that people normally see it as the pyramid of like what we need in life. And the first is, psychosocial needs, so food, water, warmth. Sorry, I'm going to cough. I was like, oh, Timisha. No, I couldn't. So I'm like stuttering. And then we have our safety needs. So our sense of security, our sense of support, right? So we have that base layer, we have our food, we have our warmth, we have our shelter, we have our physiological needs met. And then we start talking about that trust and that safety. And that's the part where we get stuck in before we're able to increase to our belongingness and our love and our needs. Right? That belongingness and that love is when we're able to reach out to community, when we're able to fit in that intimate relationships, the friends, that trust. We need that sense of security and that safety. And I personally use BariNation for my sense of security. It's that I'm able to express who I am. And, I've shared that as providers, sometimes it's hard for us to express that we're also going through things because we are human. So being able to have a sense of safety while also providing support is okay. And so how do we get that level of safety? Well, it's building that community and having that sense of trust, not only with your community, but your sense of self. How are you able to trust yourself? And this is where that anger comes in, that, well, I trusted myself before and it led me to who I was. Well, who you were and who you were was also a very beautiful human being. And we can't look past that. You would do disservice looking past who you were, because they got you to where you are and your mind and your journey and all that you've accomplished. They are beautiful.
When you could almost say that we didn't trust ourselves to be any better at one time, which it wasn't until we went through what we went through to kind of decide to have the surgery that we started actually trusting ourselves that we could be better.
Is this, Timisha, is the trust that you're talking about, it was something that I did in therapy a very long time ago, but it was when my therapist at the time really challenged me to acknowledge that there was actually nothing wrong with my brain. And this is when I was at my largest weight. He told me, your brain and your body is doing exactly what it is designed to do, and that is to keep you alive in situations where you absolutely feel not safe. And right, for whatever reason, your weight, right, like you have defaulted to food was that thing that was keeping you safe. But he gave me this gift of I guess self-love, of just saying, oh, there wasn't anything wrong with me, there isn't anything wrong with me, now I know it's a disease. But it was getting to this place where it was like, oh, things are working as they should. It's just my default became food. I relied on that. That was my safety thing. But the system worked as designed. It kept me safe. Is that the trust that you're talking about?
Sounds like your brain went into defense, right? We're keeping you safe, kind of like how we chatted a little bit indirectly about earlier. Our brain is wired into, we need to reroute the feeling of shame, guilt, sadness. We need to defend. We go into our lizard brain. Do I eat it? Do I mate it? Or do I kill it? That is our human nature, right? Of course, it's that protection. And especially when you're starting to have that sense of contemplation, maybe pre-contemplation, maybe my body doesn't feel right. So my brain is instantly going to go into, well, let's survive. Okay, let's do what we can to make ourselves feel good because we're not feeling great right now. Thank you for sharing.
Okay. I just, because you keep bringing up trust. We have to trust, we have to know that who we were in the past, was a good person, that there was nothing wrong with that person. And that did take me a lot of time to get there. Because the first time David told me this, my therapist, I was like, you hilarious. Like, oh, now I know this is not real. Like, okay. But it was true. And that wasn't, I don't want to discount the long, heavy work that I did to get there. It took me a lot of time to trust him enough to actually even explore that hypothesis. But once I got there, I was able to say, oh, no, there is nothing wrong with me. Okay, that was just what I did. So that trust is a critical component of grief. So when we apply that to our bariatric journey, we do have to get to the point where it's like, I did everything I possibly could to stay alive and to stay well. And on top of that, I was also battling a disease that I didn't have any tools for. So I was doing everything that I possibly could have. There's nothing wrong with me. I did the best that I could. Like, go me from 5 years ago. Awesome. Okay.
So you're thinking that, right? How, and the question that I had when I was going through this is, okay, you're telling me to trust myself. Well, if I knew how to do that, I would have already done that and been through this cycle, right? Like, how are you supposed to trust yourself? And exactly what you did, you honored who you used to be. You met her where she's at in her journey. You didn't try to just move through the cycle as fast as possible. You allowed space and grace to allow her to process the way that she needed to. And you didn't try to rush her. You met her where she's at, while also affirming that we are safe in where we are. You're fact checking.
That's a piece that I think is really important to reiterate, or I guess to ask a question about. Is doing this grief work possible if those other basic needs are not met? Like, if you are really worried about your safety, if you are worried about, food, shelter, the Maslow's needs, can we do this work? Or do we almost need to take a step back and go, I need to make sure that all of my basic needs are met before I can move forward? Or is this work that you can do simultaneously? Like, I'm working hard to make sure that my basic needs are met, and I'm going to work to do this grief.
Definitely need to make sure your basic needs are met, anybody's basic needs. And, I'm very thankful that the BariNation community has supports for those who, the tab of resources for people that may need those basic needs and basic support. And, there's plenty of other supports if needed around that. But our basic needs, food, shelter, water, those need to be taken care of. Just like mental health, we say make sure your physical health is taken care of first, because they may attribute to what's going on. Anemia can result into some depression, right? Let's make sure that your medical is taken care of. Let's make sure that your physical is taken care of before we go into this higher level. It doesn't mean that the process may not have, may have started, but we need to make sure that you're okay and you are safe first and foremost.
Gotcha. Okay. So it sounds like your recommendation, right, for moving through grief is very similar to what Laura recommended in the episode that we recorded with her earlier, right? It is understanding the waves or the stages of grief. It's being able to name them, and then it's having a safe place to go and just share with others what you are experiencing. Are there any other tips or tricks that you can pass on to people who are maybe wondering, how do I move through this? And in my brain, it's efficiently, but right, that might not be the right word for this.
So another quote that I personally use and absolutely love, and this one I have printed on my desk next to Oogie Boogie. For those who don't know, my son got me an Oogie Boogie base and whole thing. And grieving our past selves with the space to heal, we uncover our true selves, hiding underneath all the pain we carried for so long. We can begin to make decisions based on what we want and need rather than what will allow us to survive the hurt. I love that. I love that quote.
Wow. That's so real. I have been talking to April and Jason and some friends about how, I'm entering my third year post surgery, and I feel like I'm more myself now than I ever have been, ever in my life, which is great. However, I'm also grieving, right? That old person and all of the other discomforts and things. But that quote really, I mean, I was not living authentically because of the pain and the hurt that I was experiencing. And so to have that lifted, that weight lifted, both medically or physically and mentally, you really are able to live your true life, your true self.
Well, and that for you, it's kind of coming in waves for different reasons because you've got a lot of changes coming. Like where you've lived for a long time is changing. You're coming out of your 20s into your 30s. Like there's lots of changes that are happening right now that are kind of keeping you from kind of experiencing, like you're experiencing a wave of different things all at one time. So that is like it makes perfect sense as to what Timisha's saying. Like there are layers upon layers of these things that you're having to work through. And it's really been it's kind of been awesome to see you navigate them because to me, you've always been wise beyond your years anyway. You don't act like a 27-year-old. So, or 30, 29, you're never going to age to me. But, but honestly, so to watch you navigate it, knowing how like I myself navigated those things when I was that age, it's almost like a masterclass, so to speak, because you've done it very well. You've always reached out when you needed it. You've never had any issues. Like it's always been, you've really just done real well with the way you've done it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Not to make it about my age, but I'm entering my 30s tired. People are like, "Oh, how are you doing? How do you feel about entering your 30s?" I'm like, "Grandpa, I'm tired of this. I'm done." But no, it's true. I feel like I've taken a lot of time to really grieve, and I'm not to say that I'm done grieving. I will never be done grieving, I don't think. But it's an uncovering and unveiling of your true self, and I think that's what we mentioned at the top too, of like you're grieving to make room for the change and to make room for what's to come. I've done that. It's exhausting, it's hard, but it's also beautiful, like we said as well. But I just love that quote. I can relate to it so much.
It almost.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was
Nope,
going to
go
say,
for it,
I
Timisha.
recently published an article in the Bariatric Times last year now. And I said, society puts us into this box. And when we realize that we can lift ourselves out of the box, it's terrifying, but there's a whole world out there. And it's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's more than kind of cool. It's freaking rad. That's what that is. And what I very much appreciate about that quote is it talked, and I'm going to butcher it, but I do acknowledge that when you do start working through this grief and you acknowledge what you're moving through, you do get to this point, this reconstruction and this work through where you actually get to ask yourself, what would be best for me? What is best for me right now? And how am I going to walk towards what's best for me? In a lot of ways, right, those earlier stages of grief, I think sometimes makes it difficult to focus on yourself, right? Because yeah, shock, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, those are really heavy things. But if you can get to the point where you do ask yourself, what is going to be best for me? That almost opens up the new pathway forward through those other two waves so that you can emerge on the other side, a renewed, a different person.
Well, I do feel like what you're talking
stage.
about there, I think, April, is where you're kind of where your head was at about about the basic needs being met and simultaneously working through it. Because I think at that point, that will be kind of how you can simultaneously move through it, because all your other basic needs are met, but you're really wanting to kind of connect into what is going to serve you best and how you can best be yourself, while also kind of grieving through and going through the process.
And also the last stage, because we got to 6. And so the last stage is acceptance and hope. Acceptance and hope.
Which is like the promised land, right? When you can come out of something that is just feels so deep and dark and inescapable, that acceptance and that hope, again, that dialectic feelings, I guess, right? That's where it comes in, right? I can still be sad. I can still be missing who I was, or have these moments where, oh, I wish. But at the same time, they're all, at least for me recently, there's always that other feeling of hope. It's like, or just maybe not even that hope, but just like being okay, being at peace, being content. It's like that's always there for me now, whereas before that was not there. Hope was always missing at the end of a diet, or at the end of like whatever I was trying before surgery to battle my disease. That hope was always missing, or it took me a very long time to find it, right? When I was coming out of that grief cycle, I was like, well, that diet didn't work, I'm a failure, all of the things. It could maybe take me months to get to the point where I was like, I'm ready to try again. Whereas now I feel like I'm moving through, or these waves are coming in at a bit of a faster clip, and hope is there for me sooner than it has ever been before. And I don't know if that's just because, I don't know, I'm tapped into it, or I'm doing the work, or I don't know what it is. Is there a reason that it seems to be there easier?
I mean, I have the tattoo that says hope is the anchor to the soul. So I don't know. I'm biased. oh.
I'm visualizing hope and acceptance as my Shawshank moment, when Andy Dufresne crawls out of the pipe and just throws his hands in the air to the rain. Like that is my hope and acceptance. I need out of the pipe and my hands in the air.
I think for me though, hope was it was comfortable for me to not achieve the hope and acceptance stage. I was so used to it, like April said about the diets and whatever regimens I signed up for. It's like I would get to almost to where the hope and acceptance was, and then I would gain all the weight back, or I'd, fall off the wagon, so to speak. I hate that term, but hope and acceptance was never attainable. And now it feels more attainable with the help of my tool, my surgery, but also with the head work and the working through the grief. But for a long time, it was really comfortable to just never get that hope.
It's also fear, right? And that's, the blatant fear that we all have is what's going to happen if we are one of those people that gained all their weight back. You know, we all have those family members that are like, oh, my second cousin twice removed had that surgery, gained all the weight back. Don't you worry, just wait. And you kind of want to throat punch them because you're already taking away our hope that we have. And it, you know, our genetics suck. Ultimately, is what it comes down to. Obesity is a disease, our genetics suck. But the last thing that we ever need is for our hope to be stripped from us, because that's our reason why.
It is. And I'm really starting to understand the gift of grief is hope. That is the gift that is waiting for you on the other side if you just move through it. If you just move through it. And I guess what I keep thinking is like when we advise people to move through these feelings, what we're really saying is we just have to sit quietly with those emotions and trust that it's not going to kill us, right? The shock, the denial, the anger, the bargaining, the depression, right, is not going to end our lives. We just have to sit here and we have to pay attention to the things and the thoughts that are brought in front of us when we are moving through those feelings, right? Like that's what it means to go through these things. Going through things actually means you just have to sit in it, which is, I guess, a little bit confusing, but I'm starting to kind of piece this together.
I also want to preference that
Am
sitting with it is not going to bring back old habits, right? Sitting with what's happening will not regain. Avoiding them is when those old habits start sneaking back in.
I could attest to that, right? I mean, if we avoid, oh, I'm feeling scared about gaining weight back, what do? I turn to food. I go eat. That's my emotional eating trigger, is the fear, the unknown, the what ifs. But if you confront them, like you said, Timisha, then you're taking care of the problem or the cloud that's over your head. And I don't feel like eating because I'm taking care of the actual emotion, the fear, the what ifs. That totally makes sense.
That's the missing point that I find with a lot of my individual clients. And what I found with me is that we are taught in our fancy binder that when you go to the kitchen, distract yourself, right? That works in the short term, but we need to start asking ourselves, why did we go in the kitchen in the first place? Let's get to the core of this onion. And we can't do that when we're trying to avoid it.
Nope. That just summarized two huge things for me, right? That moving through grief is not actually about moving through. It's about just sitting in that emotion and observing what's there. And the movement is going to happen no matter what. The movement actually comes when you're still. When you're still and you're just with those emotions, movement will come. You don't have to move yourself through. And yeah, sitting, the act of sitting still should not be a fear triggering moment for us. It's not going to make anything bad happen. It's not going to cause us to regain. By not sitting with those emotions, we are not dealing with them and we are remaining in this cycle. We're not moving out of it.
We're waiting for our 30 days to be up so that we can go back to our old habits and our dieting culture.
Mm-hmm.
It's the difference between diet and a life change.
Well, when I think about my life pre-surgery, right, I remember loved ones, my mom, saying, you have to slow down. You have to slow down. You don't have time for yourself. Like, you know, when are you going to slow down? Blah, blah, blah. That was always the question of like, oh, you're always so busy. You're always doing things. You're moving all the time. And I find that when I struggle with my my metabolic wellness, my bariatric wellness, is when I'm going back to rejecting the stillness and go and doing all the things and distracting myself from the feelings. But when I sit in that stillness, that's when I am actually doing well. And it's a really difficult thing to do in this society.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're used to not putting ourselves first. We're used to going under the radar. Who are we, right? Who are we in our new body? We're no longer what society told us that we are allowed to be.
Mm-hmm. Well, and stillness and striving for better do not right, they don't mix, even though you really can't strive without stillness, right? We have this misconception between those two concepts, but we can't actually strive for better unless we are still and we work through the things that are keeping us stuck. But constantly striving and just trying to plow through is not actually going to get you anywhere. You're going to be in the exact same spot, except this one constantly.
Sorry, there's a lag. I think that we're also so used to, well, if our momentum stops, then are we going to get back onto this roller coaster and continue? And if we don't do it all at once, then we're going to lose the momentum, and second cousin twice removed is going to happen.
Oh, that momentum piece. Oh, yeah.
That's an
Yes.
entirely other podcast episode we could go into.
I was going to say we
the train again. Yep.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and again, we've been having this conversation a lot in the BariNation membership community, right? It's for so many of us, it's strive, do good things. You always have to be doing better. But what happens when we get to the point in our life where things are okay and we all of a sudden don't feel the need to be constantly striving, right? It's that stillness. And it's this, again, right? This, yeah, stillness versus momentum, right? Like, oh, those two things should not exist in the same space, but trust and believe they can and they should, because without the stillness we can't strive, right? And if we really want to make progress towards our goals, we do have to be still in a lot of ways. And I think this conversation about grief taps into to all of that. We're afraid to stop, be still, and grieve because we think it's going to slow down our momentum. But the fuel for our vehicle, the fuel for that momentum is actually the work that lives in grief. I don't know about you guys, but my brain is like leaking out of my ears. This is going to be one of those episodes that I'm going to listen to 10 times and take 100 pages of notes and still go back to Timisha with clarifying questions.
Please.
Absolutely.
I love grief because there's so much, and we don't even realize that it's happening when we're at the moment. We just don't feel secure in who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we turn to our friends and our family and in our community, and it's like, what's going on and why am I feeling this way?
Wow. Timisha, if there's one thing that you want to make sure our listeners and our watchers leave today with, what is it? What is the one thing?
There's a lot, but I think everything that I want to say wrapped up into one comment is that the past you also matters.
Past you also matters and will always matter.
Always matter.
Wow. Timisha, thank you so much for your time and expertise. I know you yourself are going through a lot of grief and big life changes, and we are just so thankful and honored that you could join us today for this very impactful conversation.
And on the back end, I'm thankful to have a space that me as a patient provider can go and have my grief and be a human as well as a provider and walk the talk the walk, whole nine.
Fred, you are always welcome here. We say this, I feel like at this point every day. BariNation is a space for us to come and celebrate, and it is a space for us to come and not be okay. It's a space to be okay and not be okay, all at the same time. All emotions are welcome there, and we just thank you for leading into that space as a patient, and we thank you for leading in that space as a professional.
Thank you.
Where can they follow you if they'd like to do so?
So my patient provider account is time for a change, Ruin Why. And you're going to see both the provider standpoint, but also how I use the knowledge that I have in my patient journey, because our stories matter.
Yes, they do. If you'd like to also continue to connect with Timisha and be supported by Timisha in a professional capacity, join the BariNation membership community. She is leading our bariatric grief support group. She also leads general support group, and she is there to help you along your bariatric journey, no matter where you're at. And I hope that you now acknowledge that every stage along your bariatric journey, no matter if you are pre-op, 1 week post-op, or 20 years post-op, grief is going to be a part of your human experience, and it's going to continue to be a part of your bariatric experience. And if you know that this is an area that you want to lean into, we would love to welcome you into our community. Timisha, thank you again for joining us today. This has been amazing.
Thank you, guys.
Jason, my friend, you want to take us out?
Yes, ma'am. We just want to thank the community for all the likes, the shares, and subscribes, the taking time out to tell people that we exist, because us helping people helps us in ways you guys can't even imagine. So continue to do that. Join us for our 14-day free trial that we have at BariNation. We have over 100, live supports a month that you guys can jump into, or you can get a lot done in 14 days. So please join us in there. And just remember, at the end of the day, you've got this, we've got you, and we'll see you next time.
Awesome. Thanks, friends.